Let's get this party started.
Hey y'all. Are we really starting? All right. Hey y'all, I'm Dom Fowler and I am a mother. I'm an educator. I'm the owner and creator of August Jones Essentials, where we offer detoxes and wellness shots. And I am the host of For the Record podcast, as you know, where we have the deep, therapeutic, uncomfortable, vulnerable, heavy, authentic, and necessary conversations. Yeah, today is episode 43. And we're talking about the current political atmosphere. We had to do a podcast talking about the current political atmosphere, of course, even though I'm not that astute. But I will become that after this podcast today. So, yes, I have Marquise Davon here today. I'm very excited for him to be here to talk about the current political atmosphere. Yeah. And go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right. No, first and foremost, thank you for having me.
Of course.
I'm so excited. Ever since I got to meet you at Pod Nation, I've been like, just a fan of your work. So, yes that's a great energy.
Thank you. Same. And shout out to Pod Nation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely. But yeah, so my name is Marquise Davon. I am educator, activist, commentator, all that good stuff. But yeah, I am the host of the Keeping It a Bean podcast, a podcast that brings together culture, commentary, all over a cup of coffee. So keeping it a bean, coffee beans,
Love it.
All of the things, you know.
Love it.
But on that podcast, I aim to really just create empathy through storytelling. So I interview a lot of black people, primarily black men, complicate and expand our ideas of what black masculinity can look like. But also, I do believe that storytelling is the purest form of empathy. And so, like, instead of being so preachy, it allows people to have space to be like, oh, I identify with this person. Oh, this is interesting. Mm-hmm. Thank you for like helping me see what a freer and more authentic black person and black man can look like. So
I love this.
Yeah. Other than that, though, left-handed, Virgo, lover of Beyonce, a bunch of things. So we here.
I love a Virgo, first of all.
Yes. Come on now.
I love a Virgo. You give me Virgo vibes. Yeah. And then, of course, part of the beehive. Like, come on now. Duh.
Come on.
Left-handed. Whew.
Come on. Everything.
No, but I love it. I really love what your podcast is all about. That is so dope. But I'm all for, like, a gimmicky, like.
Oh, very much so.
Yes. So keeping it a bean with the coffee is, like, I'm totally here for it. Oh, my gosh. Love that. All right, so I want to talk to you today about politics because you have, like, there's an initiative that is going on.
Yep.
So can you talk about it?
Yeah. And so, like, I've been working with the Congressional Black Caucus and also the Rolling Sea Action Fund. Mm-hmm. And that has been a really, really dope opportunity because it gives me the opportunity to, one, talk about things that I've always been interested in. And so the core of anything that I do is, like, create, educate, liberate. And so with them, it's also given me space to talk around disinformation, misinformation, but also the political education piece of it all too. And so that has been really, really exciting. It's a black woman-owned organization. And so just to know, like, that a lot of our people are, like, wanting to make sure that this election cycle, black voters are as engaged as possible and trying to combat political apathy, that is so, so important. So I'm happy to be able to lend my voice with not only just my platform, but also as an educator.
I love that so much because literally that's what we're here to speak to today. Yeah. And it's obviously the most important thing right now, right? It's election season.
Right.
And, you know, just for years and I mean, forever, right? The black vote has just been a very for lack of a better word, like just controversial thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, of course, us as, are you a millennial, Gen Z? Millennial, yeah. Right? Like us as millennials and Gen Z, you know, it's just a really interesting thing, the black vote. And I just want to, obviously right now, it's very just confusing. I told Marquise before we ever even started the podcast today that I'm definitely probably, I would say the majority, which is kind of sad to say, but I'm in the majority of people who might be home on the couch. You know what I'm saying? And not to say that I would actually do that. I don't know, but I'm not excited.
Are you motivated?
I'm not motivated.
And that's the problem that we're seeing today, too.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So let's talk about just what, from the beginning, let's just start off. Trump and Biden. That's what we have to work with.
Yeah.
Right. So what are your thoughts on that? We're back again for like round 2 of like the greater of two evils.
Yeah.
Like we have to vote for one. So what are your thoughts on that?
For me, I think about it as like, one, how much have we truly advanced and how much strategy has went into coming into 2024, right? Like, it should not feel like what it was 10 years ago, and
Right.
really just having the same anxiety around, like, okay, now we got to vote for the same candidates. And for me, that's a marker, that's an indication of progress, right?
Yeah.
And so if we reverted back to where we were at 2016 all the way up to now, that doesn't indicate like we've done well. And
Right.
the Democratic Party, nor has the Republican Party actually felt the need to move the needle or see anything that is like, what is progressive thought, what is
Like there's
forward
no
thinking.
growth.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so they're leaning back into what it is. And so, for all intents and purposes, I'm annoyed once again at the lesser of two evils that we have to be voting for and blah, 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 blah. But I also recognize, like, the way I've been framing it is like beyond Biden. And so, like, particularly just as a black person, I'm just like, I'm voting beyond Biden, right? Like, let's look at the cabinet. Let's look at the next Supreme Court justices that could be appointed. And that can be up to 3 of them, right? And we're already seeing the effects of the Supreme Court in terms of the rollback of Roe versus Wade, reproductive justice, education. Like, so many things are impacting particularly the black community that I think we should be a lot more alarmed about. But I also don't think that they have marketed well either in terms of how they communicate with us, in terms of like the actual impacts and the implications for those of us who are impacted the most by poor policy.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to get to the Supreme Court, but like I guess we could talk about that right now. Why not? Because that is something that's actually obviously super important right now, right? The Supreme Court and what just happened. What did Trump do with the Supreme Court? He appointed some more Trump, like, I don't know.
Yeah, so
some more Trumpers.
It's essentially a lot more Republican leaning and conservative leaning as
Okay.
well. And so for him to be able to appoint them means that when it comes to huge decisions that are made, especially in terms of civil rights, progressive rights, conservative rights, whatever the case may be, it is now going to be able to tilt in their favor a little bit more. And so when you think around the Supreme Court justice, you're thinking around like huge movements and rollbacks and policy decisions that could be precedents for anything moving forward, right? And so for them to, most recently with the Black Women Organization, I forget the name, forgive me, but to say that it is unconstitutional for them to be able to donate and make funds for specifically Black-owned businesses, and like that's a form of discrimination, sets a huge precedent in terms of like that equity that we've been searching for, right?
Yeah.
And so for that to be ruled against, that means, what does this mean for any other fund that is specifically meant to encourage upward mobility for Black people, for brown people,
Right.
For women, right?
Right.
Because now it can say like, well, you're taking access away from white people and white men and men in general and da 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 da. Like, what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's so important for us to have to break down what this means, because now this top decision will trickle down into, okay, now what do you want to do with your business, right? So what policy, if you want to specifically focus on supporting Black kids, right? How does that impact, and who gets the funding from venture capitalists? Who gets the funding from these things? Because if it's just for you, now that's not fair. But we already know how this works with white people. They already have a lot of access to capital, access. They have access to people, circles, socioeconomic status, all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
But that makes it much more difficult for you to be an entrepreneur. It makes it much more difficult for you to be able to expand your business and even want to help out, even if you're community oriented, help out the community as a whole, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really important for us to think around as like, what are these larger decisions? How does that break down to our everyday lives? And we may not always see it right away,
Yeah.
but we will feel the impacts when you want to make a larger decision.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I wonder this, right? So you're talking about the Supreme Court decision, essentially saying that you can't make things specifically for Black people, right?
Right.
Well, would that not also create a negative precedent? Then they could also make things just for white people?
Well, a lot of stuff is already made for white people. So you think about like your legacy admissions, right? Like a majority of white people benefit from legacy admissions, whereas like when they refer to it for Black people, we call it affirmative action, right? And so these are all different things that happen. And so there are a lot, like to me, I always kind of say there's no law against being white, but there are laws against being a nigger or being Black. Sorry, that was like super explicit.
No,
but
we love it here. Yeah.
yeah, but there's
We
like,
have to be.
yeah, there's rollbacks against women. There's rollbacks against Black people. There's rollbacks around people of color, right? And so when you look at that specifically, I think it's difficult for us to kind of say like this is this bar for bar type situation, but in reality, it's like very.
So do you think it's okay to
unequal.
have a policy that advantages black people over white people.
Yes, because then that will create equity in the opportunity gap. So if white people are already up here in terms of like what they're able to benefit from, if you're saying this is directly for black people to even out the playing field, that doesn't mean it's an advantage over. It means actually now we have access to the same amount of resources.
Equalizer,
so
yeah.
it's an equalizer more than it is now saying black people are above white people. No.
Well, the
black
policy
people,
advantages a black person over a white person as policy you would support.
yes, because it has to equalize. So I actually do think there's a
Just
benefit
for the
to
mere
being,
fact that they're white.
just for the mere fact that yes.
So
You don't think there should be an equalizer for black people?
I don't know if the solution to the inequity of the historical racism of the country is to apply modern racism in the opposite direction.
Well, I think it's no,
Because
That,
literally,
like, let's also not like dive into like the reverse racism stuff, right?
I'm not saying that it's reverse
Right.
racism. I'm just saying you're advantaging black people over white people,
Correct.
which is a racial policy.
No,
No,
no, not
you're
necessarily.
advantaging them merely on the fact that they're black.
Okay, so if we
and
want
the other person is white.
So if we wanna-
that you
like,
answered that question.
no, and that's
I didn't.
fine. Like if we want to name it like that, we also can't go with like a very basic definition of what like racism is, right? Like racism.
Well, I'm
is-
talking about the policy, not
Yeah,
like
so,
the.
like, Well, no, because everything actually connects together, right? And so it is important for us to be able to name the ism piece, which implies a system, right? And then who benefits from a racist system? Not black people. It's created against us. And so when we do name stuff like this, it is super important to also recognize like it actually doesn't only just benefit black people. We can name something that is explicit for black people, but we also recognize policy that is made to help black people also helps white people out too. And so when you do benefit those who are the most marginalized, everybody else inherently gets help because now everybody is actually considered in this decision. And so, yes, you can say something that's explicitly named for black people. They try to name affirmative action explicitly for black people. Who benefits the most from affirmative action?
Yeah, that's a problem. Is that
White women,
the black,
right?
Yeah, right. No, I agree with
like,
you.
and so it's important to name like
I
when
think-
policy is explicitly named,
I think
we build up.
I agree with you that a lot of things meant to benefit black people to correct the injustice of slavery was hijacked by other minority groups, and I do think that's a problem. Because I'm not arguing the fact that black people were discriminated against basically until the 80s or 70s or whatever year you want to put it, and that there could be something to be done. I'm just proposing the question. The solution is to just do it in the opposite direction. I don't know if that's.
I was going to ask Ryan, do you think there's a better solution?
I don't know. I think it's tough. I don't know if just advantaging black people over white people is the solution. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, where did that thought come from? Because I think if I can understand your rationale a little bit,
Well, it's
because
not a
my gut
thought.
reaction is to like immediately dissent, right? And because I'm just like, no, because of the very lived experience that we have, like
Yeah.
there are things that white people don't experience that black people experience. There are
No, I
specific
get- I
things that
agree.
women experience that men
Men
don't
don't.
experience.
I'm
And so
talking
there needs
about
to be
policy.
yeah, no, but there's policy literally made for women, right? And so, like, to me, it is important to kind of name, like, there are lived experiences, there is theory, and there is policy that is meant to specifically benefit you, right, as a woman. Because I don't experience pregnancy. I don't experience, like, if we want to talk about, like, abortion, right? Like, men indirectly benefit from abortion rights because that also is an economic implication on us, right? And if we cannot support a child and a woman's right to choose, then that is also another space where, oh, well, now you got to keep the kid. Oh, now whose responsibility is it? And then socially, who does the pressure actually fall on in terms of who is a good parent?
Right.
It tends to fall on the mother.
Right.
Right. And so we do need to actually think around the holistic aspect. And so I do appreciate the question and the push, but I actually do think that the social and political and policy writing actually all needs to be intersected in order for it to actually make sense. So I really try to move from a space where my politic is rooted in humanity first versus like, here's this individual benefit and who benefits more. Like, no, like there actually should be more policy. Now, if we're talking about strategy wise, it may not benefit a Biden campaign to say this is explicitly for black people,
Right.
because now this can take away from a large white vote
Yeah.
that he may have, because they're just like, well, I don't know about this,
Right.
because there are still those moderates who will be like, explicitly black, how do we all benefit, right?
Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I appreciate that push too. I mean, all of this is very important information, right? We need to understand this better. That's why we're here today. So, with that being said, the debate. Let's talk about the debate.
Oh God.
oh yeah,
Yeah. Cause obviously, like you were talking about from the beginning, right? Like it's real, like beyond Biden. Biden is a very, I think that's important. That's a good message, because clearly we're not energized by Biden,
Right.
Right? Like most people are not energized by Biden, and there are a lot of people energized by Trump, right?
Yeah.
So right now it's looking real shaky. The debate, his voice was very shaky.
yeah,
The entire time,
Yeah.
right? Like it always just like kind of, it was what we knew it to be, what we knew it would be, and then it was that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it was like really bad. So what do you think about it? Like, are we thinking like new candidates? Are we thinking?
Oh.
So all right, what's it given?
So I can't remember if you remember the debate, which is the one that was televised and on radio. I'm trying to remember. And the person who was televised, he looked better, and so people who watched the debate said, "Oh, he actually won the debate."
Oh wow.
But if people listened to the debate, it was actually the other candidate
Got
that,
you.
in their minds, actually won the debate.
So the voice actually had like a big,
Yes, because you were
impact.
actually listening to what they were saying. But if you were viewing a person,
yeah,
and you see the confidence that somebody can exude,
yeah,
that would make it the perception of that debate. Trump for today,
yeah,
Trump looked better
Yeah,
on stage
yeah.
and felt more coherent on stage. And for a president, this is a person who should not have any health implications. He cannot come off weak. He cannot
Right.
have any issues.
Right.
X, Y, and Z. For all intents and purposes,
Mm-hmm.
Biden won the debate. He did not win the public perception, though.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I think
yeah.
those things are two things to like really name
Yeah.
in this moment, is because Trump came off more coherent. He came off more confident.
Mm-hmm.
Though we look at all the fact checkers, he lied damn near
so
every
many times, ignored so many questions.
right.
Yeah.
And so it's important to really like name these things as like the space of media literacy, understanding how to dissect moments is also going to be important, because they all play a role together. But for all intents and purposes, if you just simply listen to the debate and listen to what Biden had said, you can say he was a better debater in the moment, besides the clips that went super viral of him messing up names, Vice President Trump,
Yeah.
President, all that good stuff, right?
Yeah.
However, public perception on how America is moving is also important too, right?
Yeah.
And so the presidency is important. There was a president who had his he was disabled, and he made the illusion that he was standing up all the time. But behind closed doors, they know he was wheelchair bound, right?
Right.
And so it's so important to really understand that optics also play an important role on our safety and our confidence in a president as well. And so I think those things are the sad reality, is that those are competing values.
Yeah.
Who looks better?
Yeah.
Who is better?
Right. Right.
And what looks better, it feels safer for our own public imagination.
And what's really I don't want to use the word sad, but just confusing is the fact that we're not even talking about who just looks better in the actual debate and on that stage. We're talking about who looks better on these social media clips.
Very much so.
Right, that were taken out of context
Yep.
and pulled and put everywhere, and then maybe remixed, and now you're messing with public perception on a way larger scale than just what the public actually saw and perceived for themselves.
Yeah. Oh, and that's so important, because you got to name. You also realize, like, especially with the advent of social media and how much that dominates spaces, and how many lazy consumers of politics, political apathy that we're also engaging in, they are going to look for those clips that are just like, all right, that's going to reinforce my suspicions I already had of Biden and not being a good president. Everybody knows he's bad at speeches right now. Everybody knows debates are not his strongest suit, all of that good stuff. And so, like, it is important to, like, this is nothing new, but I think like the political anxiety that's happening as this election draws closer is the thing that is pushing people to be like, well, maybe we do need a new candidate. Well, maybe we just need to suffer for 4 years, so this way we can just be done with it afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that all of it is a sad amalgamation of like where people are frustrated at, where people are just like, well, can I get something that's a little bit more confident, or is it just like, we hate both of them.
Right.
And so it's a hard balance, but I do think like that debate leaves so many people unmotivated. It leaves so many people apathetic. It leaves so many people scared, frankly.
I want to ask you, what do you think the Democrats need more? Do you think they need better marketing more or a better candidate more?
It's both.
Yeah.
But in terms of what we need right now,
Mm-hmm.
we can't go for a different candidate right now.
Mm-hmm.
A different candidate requires a completely different source of funding because they can't transfer their funds to a new candidate, which is it's very expensive to have a presidential campaign. And if you don't have that money right away, you can't transfer those funds.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Wow.
And so those are things that people aren't thinking about in
Yeah.
terms of like how this can actually
And don't even
impact.
know.
And don't know, right?
Yeah.
And so trying to identify a new candidate that would then maybe go to a court of judges instead to be able to elect this person that would make more sense, right? Which means that now you have to rally a new bunch of people. You now have to find new confidence in the person. And this person would literally have to be in your face every single day of the time up until that election,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There's not enough money for that,
Yeah.
right? And so the reality is, and I hate that Biden's doing it now, but all of them are like, oh, now we want to talk around how much we donated to HBCUs. Now we want to talk about the how many black people Biden has appointed in this time. All of those are wonderful symbolic gestures. That was great in 2008 where representation mattered more. That was
Right.
great in 2016 when
Right.
this felt groundbreaking. But in this point in time, to
Mm-hmm.
go against Trump, you cannot run a campaign that you were running back in 2015,
Right.
2016.
Right.
You need to then also be just as audacious as that man because the reality is this is not a normal presidential run.
Yeah.
This is not normal.
Yeah.
And so it is so important for us to really look at him doing more marketing. And he's not doing press as much as other presidential candidates are either, right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that he's not doing press and he's being very specific, like there's no reason, no shade to Speedy, but he shouldn't have had that interview when we should be working with actual journalists.
Right.
You shouldn't be sending pre-recorded questions
Right.
out to, which has happened with WURD,
What
right?
happened?
They ended up, one of the hosts, they admitted the Biden campaign actually sent out predetermined questions for them to be able to ask.
Oh, wow.
That goes against journalistic integrity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Biden is also being really shady with the press and the media.
Yeah.
And that is making us have less faith. And so the reality is he needs to be able to ask the hard hitting questions, but he also needs to start utilizing his executive order because when he does that, that then can make the House look bad. That can make the Senate look bad. And then can also waver trust. If he were to say, hey, we are going to now push for limits for the Supreme Court, right? He does that, they block it, they say, yo, I tried, and at least it makes, and this is all political theater, right?
Yeah.
And this will then at least put faith of saying like, oh, he actually attempted, he actually is trying to fight. Right now, he's trying to run the moral high ground, whereas the Republican Party, Trump, is not.
Yeah.
And for us to try and, go high when they go low, no, go to hell.
Yeah,
and play the game.
Yes.
Because right now it's not normal, and we need to have a president that will reinstill like you are actually going to at least fight for us.
Yeah. It's so interesting, like listening to you talk about how like in 2008 representation was just important, and like we're just constantly climbing this ladder, and it's a beautiful thing that I feel like at this point Black people are much more informed.
Yeah.
But it's creating a thing where it's like we're so informed that it's like, what are we doing here? You know what I'm saying? like
It's facts.
like what are we doing? Like, are y'all really playing in our faces? And it's like, of course we're rebelling against, and it's so hard because we have, half of us that are like, or I don't want to say half, but some of us that are like, we have to vote y'all because of this, that, and the other. Like,
Yeah.
you're seeing the bigger picture, what have you. And then there's some of us just like, nah, they keep playing in our face. We're not giving them our vote no more. Like, you know what I'm saying? So
Right.
it's like a really hard place to be in. And like you said, whatever marketing that they were doing behind the HBCU thing and all the things, and like you said, the symbolic
Gestures
that they're providing definitely should have came sooner, and is given too little too late.
And that's actually my biggest concern and some of my biggest critique of what's going on right now is like, nah, bro, like you can't just say all the things you have done in retrospect. Like those things needed to be seen. And the thing is, I think it's funny because it's how I connect like a Sexy Red and like a Miss Netta's comments around like wanting to vote for Biden, right?
Yeah.
Like you notice Black people were experiencing economic anxiety, just like at least Trump gave us $1,200.
Ooh,
At least they
child.
gave us this because those are fixes that you can feel
immediately, right? That
And that's
instant
the thing.
gratification. Yep.
Yeah, whereas like the democratic policies are things that we're not feeling right away, or it
Right.
doesn't seem like we're feeling right away.
And they just need to explain that better.
Yeah, and so for me, I'm just like, they actually need, and it's funny, like even with like the TikTok ban and stuff like that, I'm like, actually TikTok would be working in your favor right now.
Yeah.
Because if you were able to get influencers who actually knew what they were talking about and could motivate another base,
Yeah.
that's important to name.
No,
And
for
so like
sure.
I think specifically around like the millennial vote,
Mm-hmm.
that's where a lot of our issue is. Now I think like younger Gen Z, we keep forgetting that they can also vote, and they
Yeah.
actually lean left a lot more than anything. And so though
Yeah.
they can be frustrated at times,
Yeah.
they are also a huge motivating base that I don't think we're actually paying enough attention to,
Right.
because they sway much more left than they do right. Oops,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's so funny, like, you know, as a millennial, like to think like, oh, there's people younger than us that actually like they have a say so too now, you know. So yeah, absolutely. All right, so the assassination attempts. What do we think about this? I really am enjoying all the like conspiracy theories on this, honestly.
Mm.
Oh, I want to know what you think. I want to know, because definitely Gen Z thinks it's fake for sure.
Yeah, okay, so I'm of two minds, right? Like the public platform in me, and it's just say it, yeah, now it's on the record, you know?
Yeah.
The public platform in me is like, I want to just make sure I'm staying responsible with my platform and understanding like an assassination attempt still is that's still political violence, right?
Yeah.
However, I'm also not going to tiptoe in the fact that like Trump is a master of spectacle.
Yeah.
And like he knows how to move a moment. He knows how to do this thing, right? And he does
Yeah.
it really well. And so to me, I'm like, there's also like something is super inhuman about him if like he
Yeah.
was actually shot,
Right.
and immediately he was like, this is a great moment, right? Let me capture this moment very quickly
Right.
and know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Like to me, I'm like, that's scary, right?
Yeah.
And then you also have some people who actually died, right? And so that's also important to name, is like, no, actually in this entire spectacle, lives were lost.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, so for me, I'm like, let's take this assassination attempt and actually just lean into like what this means, further implications, because that actually left me extremely miserable.
Yeah.
Like afterwards, I was like dejected. I said, oh, this is what's going to rally even like the non-voters,
Yeah.
the people who are in between, the people who weren't willing to get off their couches and go.
Yup.
A president has survived.
Yup.
Right? And he's going to name that
Yup.
so much. And in
Yup.
my mind, I'm like, dog, this is a time to highlight hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
you want to talk about gun violence? Oh, you want to talk about the NRA? Oh, you want to talk about this? Oh, policy.
Oh, God.
Like, right. And that's so important to name, because now Biden has to run an impeccable campaign.
Yeah.
Because right now they are deifying
Yeah.
Trump.
Yep.
They are saying we need to be a nation under God, Christianity, all over again. So if you are paying attention to any of the talking points,
Yeah.
it is fear not. Like that's a direct allusion to the Bible, right?
Yeah.
It is, oh, he survived. Oh, he sacrificed himself. Oh, the greatest sacrifice is this. Da 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 da. They are using very Christian-based charged language to unify the country again, and this was the perfect storm of like, oh, this person over here is not doing what he needs to do. This person over here, though,
look how strong he is.
Look how strong he is.
Oh gosh.
And America loves that.
It's really genius, honestly.
Yeah, no, it's actually scary how genius it is.
It's
That's
so genius.
maniacal.
Because like the one thing that like everybody's complaining about Biden, like he's not strong enough, he can't do it. Like he's like near death, he's whatever, all these things, right? And
When
it's like,
were they only like 3 years apart?
right, exactly. Literally, like we're not like they're both old men. So it's just like the fact that he's like that for that to happen. Yeah, the Black Power fist goes straight up, and then the Hail Hitler, which is wild. But Ryan, I want to go to you about the assassination attempt. What do you think about it?
I think people don't realize that people are people, and don't blame malevolence when ignorance will do. I think if you look at what the Secret Service chief said, what she should be fired. She's just like, oh, we didn't secure the roof of the building because the slope was dangerous. That's crazy. I was in the military, right? So like 150-yard shot is not hard to make. So that goofy guy, you know, doesn't know how to shoot a gun. So, you know, the liberals, if they go in that direction, they're not gonna win. But I just think I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it was super lucky, but it could be a conspiracy. I have no idea. But this idea that Trump set it up and got someone killed seems pretty fantastical to me. The facts of the case of what we saw seem plausible. So, yeah, Trump definitely gonna win after all that. And then he put his arm up and was like,
Got that shot.
"Keep going." Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Interesting. All right. Let's move on to Project 25.
Oh God.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, actually, it's way too long. I mean, I tried to do a little bit of research on it. I went on ChatGPT and whatnot. But I don't know. Do you have anything that you think is pressing that we need to be super? I mean, obviously, it sounds like we need to be concerned about the entire Project 25.
Yeah.
But what do you think is the most pressing issue?
Oh man, the eradication of the Department of Education.
I'm here for
The
that.
Department of Justice, right?
Yeah.
I think it's so important for us to like be able to know like what they are thinking and trying to do, and also recognize like some of this has already been in motion, right?
Yeah.
I will say it till I'm blue in the face. The biggest atrocity and harm of 2020 was actually the rollbacks on education, the attacks on education and educational access, right?
Yeah, let's talk about that a lot,
Yeah.
actually, like in depth. Well, this voucher system thing, what is this? Do you know?
Oh, what voucher system are you talking about?
So it's something about like vouchers. Maybe I'll do so. I'll Google it and I'll let you keep talking about
Yeah,
Project
yeah,
25 in general. But it's something about like they're giving vouchers to, like people to send their kids to private school.
Oh, are you talking about that the John they're doing with Rock, the thing that was associated with Jay-Z and Rock Nation?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No.
Yeah, it's
no,
not.
no.
It's not a good thing.
No, I don't think it's a good thing. Like that helps individuals. Like access to education is always going to be important, right?
Yeah.
And when we think about that, especially if we're thinking around how they're doing it in Philly schools, it's also important to name like Philly's public schools are not getting enough funding, right? We're also like, and I work in college access and education access work, right? And so it's
Yeah.
important to know like the work that we are doing is actually focused on ensuring that more resources are actually allocated to public schools.
Yeah.
Philly needs that a
Yeah.
lot more. And so like immediately the jump on is like every kid should have access to like this quality education, because if we know the education they're getting in Philly, then it's not that great.
Right.
But in reality, you're also taking students away.
Yeah,
Right. And so
yeah.
by taking students away and putting them into private schools, you actually are weakening the infrastructure. You're actually not allowing space for a lot of these teachers to be able to like invest in our kids, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And also investing in the schools to create pipelines work, not only for teacher diversity and educator diversity workforce, but then you're also thinking around dual enrollment programs.
Yeah.
Right? If they already don't have a good school profile, it actually doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
This puts more pressure on trio programs that are like focused on college access, first generation students getting in. So all of this is actually all in conversation with each other and will further require Black exceptionalism and requires us to then send the creme de la creme. So it's like a reinforcement of like the bastardized version of the talented 10th, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so like the best of the best will be able to have access to these schools, but the students who may need the resources the most will still not get what they need to do, which means when they enter the workforce or want to go into post-secondary stuff, they're probably not going to want to, they're not going to be able to compete.
Right.
And so it's so important because it's so much more of a layered conversation in terms of what does access look like to post-secondary stuff?
Yeah.
What do other institutions mean? And who is going to actually be able to be picked from each of these schools, right?
Yeah,
And so I
yeah.
think it's important to really understand that though it sounds good on the surface,
Yeah.
it actually can roll back so much work that we are doing for DACA students and Dreamers and Black and brown students who are impacted from a public school system.
Yeah, because the public school systems, charter school systems in particular, right? Like the less enrollment, the less funding that you'll get. You know, and so the less funding that you'll get, obviously the education is going to be lesser. You know,
Suffers, yeah.
it's not going to be as good as it would be. And these vouchers are only for a certain amount of money, right?
Correct.
So it's still only benefiting the people who have enough money to, you know.
Well, to provide context, normally with the charter schools, what's happens is that there's a number associated with every child in public school with the
Right.
tuition. And so if you get a voucher or to go to a charter school, that tuition tax money, the property tax money for the school tax, is appropriated to the charter school instead of the public school. And so that's always the big debate. The argument being that, you know, with teachers unions and things like that, that the public school per student is getting not as good education versus the charter school program, or maybe the charter school has some kind of specific benefits, or like, I don't know, like I don't know the Jay-Z thing, but maybe like Dr. Umar's school, if he was a charter school, they're going to be like teaching a different type of curriculum that isn't bound by the state as much as the public school. So there's always this legendary argument between charter schools and public schools for those reasons, because a charter school can kind of do things that a normal public school can't, but the money is being taken away from the public school to go to the charter school.
And then even when you get into nuances of it too, right? Like black run charter schools also are having much more difficulty in staying open for long periods of time and actually being able to see the results and how that drives too. And so like we can get as granular as possible, and that's there's still such a tension and struggle there, because even in that inner work of the charter school system, and you think around like the KIPS or the Masteries or the uncommon schools, all that good stuff, like that's also like large networks elsewhere that they are bringing in a lot of money to. And so it's very difficult to like name so many smaller nuances on why that can, this Project 2025, but also like that specific voucher stuff can also be impacting our kids at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Obviously, and it's so important that our kids are getting a proper education, or the best education, and that we're seeing growth in that too, because obviously it has not always been the best education, especially in cities like Philadelphia. So yeah, absolutely. Obviously, that's pressing. Yeah, I hear a lot, like, as I was doing research for this, and as I said, I politics stress me out. And actually, we're going to get, we're going to get into that, because actually, let's just go there. So the next two things I want to talk about was media literacy, which I know, like, is a big push, that an initiative that you are taking on, just spreading information about that, and political literacy too, because like someone like myself, and I think most people are not, let's not say most, there are a lot like me, right? Like, who are just we're not concerned. Like, we would love to be more concerned about politics, but it's just like we're living our everyday lives. Our boots on the ground. I'm like actually teaching the babies in these charter schools. You know what I'm saying? In these places like Camden, New Jersey, or Philadelphia. You know, and so it's just like, it's not that I don't have the time, because you can make the time for anything, but I'm stressed. You know what I'm saying? And it's very daunting. And it just stresses me out too much. And so I don't get so into politics. So with that being said, what do you have to say to people like that, as far as media literacy and political literacy goes? Like, what do you think that those people could do to be a little bit, I don't know, better informed, or just like better involved?
Oh man, it's so much. I think one, it's a lot of us, right? Like 50% of this country does not vote.
Okay,
like,
I'm happy it's not just
okay.
me.
No. Like, we can also like name a thing,
but,
that don't engage in like politics. And so it's important to note, like, a lot of the decisions we're making, a lot of the people we're talking to are also people who will either just be swayed to vote or already participating in the voting process, right? And so for us, I'm just like, y'all, don't make it seem like just black people are not voting. Like, it's everybody, right? So when I think around like the political education, but not only that, the media literacy has to come with the fact that like we need to be engaging in ideas more. We need to actually know what are the three different levels of states, right?
We
need to know the different levels of politics and stuff like that. We need to know how policy works, but we also need to be engaged in the stuff that happens to us on a much more local level. Like, local politics is really where we feel the most of everything. And so it's hard because we don't feel it all of the time. And I think we are Americans are very individualist in nature. We want what we want. But not only that, when we are trying to engage in media literacy, most of us don't read above, America does not read above a 6th grade reading level. Right? Like, it's important to name that, right? And so like even the critical engagement of media is also difficult, because some people don't know what actual cited source is versus one that's not.
That goes back to that education piece.
It's the education piece. And that's why I think the attack on education is actually the biggest downfall, because it sets the seed as young as 3rd grade. Right? And so it is important, because from there you then can see literacy levels, you can see educational access, you can see who goes into prison, which then leads to other pieces of access, right? And so when you are going into media literacy, it's important for us to be able to know what is a good source, what is a bad source, what is a fact, what is an opinion, what is misinformation, what is disinformation. When you look at these pieces and you don't know how to discern the either one from the other, then that's what becomes more difficult. The reign of Trump is actually the age of disinformation and misinformation. You're purposely telling false truths, not false truths. It's purposely telling lies, right?
Yeah.
And so as you were telling these lies, now we have to discern what is real, what is not. Is this just because I like him? Am I actually pro-Trump, or am I anti-Biden? Am I anti-Trump? Am I pro? Whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So all of this plays a role in terms of like how we go. And the other piece is that we are also lazy consumers of media and politics.
Yeah.
We're lazy consumers. And so most people, especially like even use me for example, a lot of my base will wait to see, all right, what does Marquise think? Now whatever I think, they're going to sway to do. And so they're going to say, well, who are you voting for, Marquise? Local politics, who are you voting for, Marquise?
Yeah.
And it's not anything new that I've experienced. In my very first podcast I did, we quite literally changed the local elections for Reading, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Because people were just like, well, we want to know what millennials and Gen Z are actually talking about, what they think about. And so when they heard our perspective, that actually determined the two candidates that we had. They said, well, Marquise doesn't bang with the one candidate, so we obviously all should vote for this one.
Wow.
Right? And so to know that there's a direct correlation in terms of like people who are platformed and the responsibility, because they are going to look at you. They're going to be like, well, Don, maybe we are kind of looking at you. Though you represent us, we're going to look at you because you have more eyes on you. And so the sad reality is, because of us having more eyes on us, it's also an assumption that we know more, which means that we have a greater responsibility. And it's very difficult because it's not fair to put on any of us, especially if our platforms are not meant for that, right?
Right, for sure.
Yeah, and so I think that's the other piece when I think around media literacy, when I think about political education and just doing all of our own small parts to like motivate a people. So I will always, like, if I'm in a barbershop, they're like, yo, Keith, like, what is this? I'm always going to be honest. When I think around just getting my students civically engaged, like, cool, let me get you registered to vote. When the last election, I was outside getting people registered to vote, right? And so it just depends on capacity, and we also have to be empathetic, but we also cannot throw fear in people's face. Fear is not a motivator. It's not a motivator.
Why? That's like the biggest, that's what they're using to motivate us
Yeah.
on both ends. Like, because even like on the like Republican end, right, their thing is like, oh, they're going to take our guns away, they're going to like everything is like fear over there too. It's just all, we're just being fear mongered into voting for someone.
And in my mind, I'm like, nah, dog. And I was like, at least, this sounds so bad, but I said on the Republican, a lot of them are some dummies. They're smart, but some of them are just lazy and dumb. And so they're just aligned to whiteness. They're aligned to power. They're aligned to themselves. The Republican values align to individual. The thing on the left is that a lot of us are just like, well, I'm hungry. Okay, so how do we handle this? Oh, well, we want access to education. We want access to we don't want food deserts happening anymore. We want to make sure that women have rights, right? And so all of these splintering things and ideas and ideals and where we want to move, they can also cause tension within our own stuff. And so if we're not aligned on, and I kind of always use like the Black Panthers around it, but like, what are the 10 commandments that at least the left can align on, of just like, we need access to education, we need access to food, we need access to reproductive rights, right? How can we at least name all of this? Right? Because there's such a widespread idea of like, well, here's your radicals, here's your moderates, here's your left of center, here's like all these different ideas of what Dems can look like on the left. But Republicans are pretty much aligned on a decent amount of things. There might be some things that are dissenting, but they do know that they want power.
Let me ask you this, because listening to you say this right now is just, this is all I'm hearing is Dr. Umar on the Breakfast Club most recently, and talking about, Dr. Umar is, you know, Dr. Umar. But like, when we talk about Black people in particular, right? Because we talk about all these different, political like groups or parties, right? Should Black people in particular be what's the word, like, coming together to decide what we need for ourselves? Not that we have to be like a monolithic and only, vote for, obviously there's no way that all Black people are going to vote for one person. But if we did, couldn't we our vote would be more valuable.
Well, I would actually push and say actually we do vote against our own self-interest a lot of time. There's a reason that 92% of black women vote for them, are leading the Democratic Party. 86% of black men are overwhelmingly voting Democratic, right? Like, that's important to name. Like, we don't want to take that away because oftentimes they're like, well, we're divided in terms of what we want, blah, blah, blah. I was like, actually, no, we do come together a lot more than people like to realize. Now, there are social things where, like, no, and, like, you know, there are still black people who are conservative. I have family in the South. We do not vote the same. Right? Like, for me, I'm just like, oh, no, like, let the pro-choice, da-da-da-da. And then it's like, pro-life. And I'm like, right?
Yeah.
And so it's also important to really name, like, there are still things that are different amongst our community. But when it comes to voting, we actually are, out of any group, we are the most aligned,
like we
right? We vote together despite what our personal beliefs are, because we do understand the ramifications of a Trump presidency does not look good for us as black people as a total. So right now, we actually sacrifice our personal politics to ensure that, like, for our own survival.
I like this one.
It's so sad because I feel like we have to sacrifice our own personal politics for our own survival. But then it's not like our vote is not powerful because we also are still not getting what we want out of.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
We keep serving as an equalizer for everybody else.
Right, exactly. Which goes back to what we were talking about earlier a little bit, how it's just like black people, you know, just the rights that are created for us are often, you know, used for other demographics.
Which is why I think, like, the push is, like, this is why I actually push for, like, more explicitly black policy that is made for us. That's why I'm just like, I think we need to be a lot more audacious. And honestly, we need to be a lot more strategic in these next 4 years.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'm like, the strategy for me is not on the national level right now. The strategy for me is actually, like, get more radical politicians in local office.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it so much more if you're looking at the Working Families Party and stuff like that. These are people who are working for in the name of unions. These are people who are working in the space of, like, who are the working class, and how are we also making sure that they get their basic needs met?
Right.
Because the reality is, like, even if we go back to Obama, right? Obamacare actually benefited a lot of people because crime actually also went down.
Yeah.
Everybody had their basic needs met.
Yeah.
Right? And so when basic needs are met, everybody can actually function, and then we can exercise what we truly believe in. But if I'm working from I'm hungry and you're hungry, and now my hunger is manifesting into frustration and apathy, and now I'm turning on you, and now who can I trust? Because guess what? My basic needs aren't met.
Right.
Right. And so I think it's so important to, like, name when things were happening and correlate it and understand how to look at data.
Yeah.
I think we, again, go back to it, but we need better communication.
Yeah.
Better communicators of this information.
Yeah.
But then also, not only that, for us to take time, at least 20 minutes out of our day, if we have enough to do that, to then engage in, like, let me learn something new today, let me hear something new today. But again, it's exhausting. I'm exhausted, and I sit in this a lot of the time.
Yeah. So exhausting. It really is. All right. Do you realistically think that Biden can beat Trump in this election?
Yes.
You
I
do?
do think it's still absolutely possible. I do think it is possible, but I do think it requires them to run a spotless campaign for the next, less than 100 days now? What are we at, like 95 days until the election or something like that? It is so important for us to be able to, one, on the ground, be able to rally a lot more, and also not lead necessarily with fear, because I think right now everybody's kind of being reactionary to Project 2025, and it's necessary to be reactionary to, like, this big entity, right? That they have been forming, and there are 3 different levels to it. Like, there is so much around it. But I think for us, when it comes to Biden, it is not to think about it cannot be driven by simply, like, I want to feel morally pure in this moment, because there are foreign things that he's doing that I absolutely disagree with, and I'm actually just like, no, we need to be a lot better when it comes to foreign relations, when it comes to Israel and Palestine, when it comes to all of these things that frankly is moving me away from him. But I also recognize right here in this Black as America,
no, seriously,
I will go and frame my vote as a beyond Biden vote, because I know in the long term, I need to ensure that there are rights that are still going to be fought for on so many different levels. And so for right now, realistically, I definitely think it's going to go neck and neck.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that there is still a possibility for Biden to win.
Okay, Ryan, I want you to follow up on that with why you're going to vote for Trump.
Whoa. Well, first of all,
It's crazy that is like a volatile statement. You're going to vote for Trump.
You know what it is? I'm just not super interested in national politics. I agree with you that local actually means a lot more. I think you guys realize like there's tens of thousands of people that work in government. Mm-hmm. So who the president is shifts the needle very small.
Yeah.
Checks and balances.
To Biden's credit, and you know, I'll give you some flowers here, is that he appointed some people that did some good things as far as monopoly powers and some stuff with unions that I think was good. So like these appointments, like the Supreme Court, like that's a very valid reason to vote for someone because, you know, on my end, I like the Supreme Court decisions on concealed carry here in New Jersey and things about guns. So you're actually able to exercise your Second Amendment right. I don't agree with the abortion stuff, and I think if the Republicans could get off of that, they would do a lot better. But Trump's going to win because but again, like to be honest, your life ain't going to change whether Trump or Biden wins really anyway. So it's really not that big a deal. I don't really take it that serious. It's fun to talk about, but we're having a serious conversation about this stuff. So, like we're talking about at the debate, right? Oh, well, Biden didn't look as good, or who really cares? But
it's, you know, people. That's a sad reality.
Yeah, right? That's how people vote, and that's it's theater, right? But if we're talking about what really actually happens. What I want black people to do is take more ownership of their local communities. So like I was just thinking about this the other day. I'm on the land development board here, right? And actually, a lot of our town council, even though it's probably 20% black in West Hampton here, 3 of the 5 members are black. But when I go to the meetings, it's all white people at the meeting, at the township council meeting. So there's like apathy, except for certain people who are motivated, and I would just like to see us participate a lot more. I think black people are disenfranchised. That's why we don't vote, because we don't think this country belongs to us. I think flying an American flag is a political statement for black people, because people have come to my house and be like, oh, I didn't know if I want to go there. You have all these American flags. You know, this is our country too, right? Yeah. So like, yeah, but if you concede the country, then you have nothing. So I don't understand these things. So, but if we want to get into the clickbait about Trump, I don't know, man. It's more strength. I'm not for regulation. I think Democrats and liberals mean well with a lot of the policies, but I think they don't work the way they think that they're going to work. That's why in the beginning I was asking you, creating the precedent for basically discriminating based off of race again is a good thing, because what happens when that gets turned against you again? And that's what I think a lot of people that want the government to have a lot of control and power are not considering, is like, okay, you're going to give the government all this control and power. What happens when the people you don't agree with have all this control and power? I'd rather the government have less control and power, less regulation, and less rules, so that you can live your free life and do stuff. Obviously, there's historical issues with that, but at the end of the day, that's why I lean on the side of that. For example, the charter school argument that we were having. One could argue that charter school, because charter schools are normally like a conservative Republican argument, okay? So, but for black people, it could benefit black people, because we can have schools kind of to what your argument is that maybe caters to black people more specifically. But you can't do that unless you have charter schools or vouchers to pay for it. So I think all these narratives are all messed up, and I think people and the black vote again is going 90% one way, so everyone thinks it's a freaking joke. So we need to be more discerning about who we vote for. So I think we need to make our vote harder to get, and I think we need to make our vote more balanced on both sides to be able to attract policies or politicians to come to our side on things that we want to see happen.
Okay, this is interesting.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's definitely like a Definitely an interesting take.
Yeah, it's all. This is all interesting and very informational, and I just want to say thank you so much for all of this information. I do want to, like I do every podcast, I want to ask you what you want to say for the record. I think we could wrap here. I feel like that's a lot of information that we've given out to people today. You know, I feel like I love that we had two different perspectives from two different realms, both black men. You know, and in the perspective of me, a black woman, and just. I just don't know. I just don't know. But I know a lot more after this podcast than I did before. So that was really beautiful. So, like I asked everybody, you know, when we're wrapping this podcast, what would you like to say for the record?
Oh, man. For the record, let's focus on what these next 4 years can look like as well. And more particularly, like, Black people who have Black interests at the center of their politic, I think is going to be so important. But get them in on a local level because we need proof of concept. I do believe policy changes before culture. Culture changes before policy ever does. And so once we get a mass group of us who are more radical in our thoughts and more pro-Black in our thoughts, it'll naturally just gravitate towards because they'll start seeing the benefits. I'm not here to like change the minds of any oppressors. I'm really just here to make sure that Black people feel motivated and empowered. And so when we are thinking about political strategy, go into thinking around who in our local politics truly represent everything that we need and live our true experience as a majority right now. We hit that critical mass, we can then change from a local to state to presidential.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, Marquise, let them know where they can find you. You know, let them know all the good things.
Oh, you already know what it is. Marquise Davon across all social media. That's MarquiseDavon. I'm the host of the Keeping It a Bean podcast as well. I'm also the host of the Heavy is the Crown podcast. So if you're a fan of Bel-Air, the reimagining of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, feel free to hop over and listen to that as well with me and Skip from BK. And honestly, I'm just a man of the Twitter streets, mostly first and foremost. So you'll always see my good morning to niggas and niggas only. And I appreciate you. Thank you for having me here.
I like good morning to niggas and niggas only. Beautiful. But thank you so much for coming. This has been like so refreshing, actually. And thank you so much for this. So guys, thank you all also for watching, listening, liking, sharing, following, telling people about For the Record podcast. If you haven't already, subscribe to Talk to Me Nice Podcast Network, YouTube. Follow them on Instagram and follow For the Record podcast on Instagram. This is episode 43 of For the Record podcast. Of course, shout out to my guy Ryan, who is here all 43 episodes. And we are out. See y'all. That was good.